I guess while maybe the credits roll, I'm just going to try and gather some of my thoughts about how I feel about this game. Like, having played both Demon Souls and Elden Ring, so basically playing the first Souls game and the last Souls game, I don't necessarily have a ton of perspective, necessarily. Like, I feel that this game definitely serves as, in some sense, like a prequel to Elden Ring. Like, I feel like it's almost there in some sense, like where there's so much of this game that is basically just copied and pasted into Elden Ring, I feel, and it, like, in some sense, I guess, like, having started with Elden Ring, it's been an experience going back and playing these games and realizing, like, oh, this is just how these games have always worked. Some of these things are actually not that new or that interesting. This is just the whole series, like the fact that you can use boss souls to make weapons. You know, that's not just an Elden Ring thing, right? It's a series thing, and so I think in general, I think this is definitely pushing the limits of like especially compared to Demon Souls. Like, it's trying to be more linked. It's like there's a semi-open world where in some sense all the areas are connected. You're not just like teleporting to 5 different random unconnected locations like you do in Demon Souls, and so it's like it's on its way to Elden Ring where there's like a semi-open world. All these places are linked. They all obviously exist in the same world. But I think part of that problem is that like some of these places are now big enough where even the kind of basic map you get in Elden Ring would actually be helpful. You know, just to even know the extent of some of these areas, because I think sometimes, like, I think the problem with these games has always been you don't even know what you're missing. Like, unless, like, reading the notes on the ground, sometimes reading those messages will help you find things that you would otherwise miss, but most of the time you don't even know what you're missing. It's like either you have to stumble across things, or you just literally have to play with a walkthrough. Like, I feel like my playthrough of this game has been kind of short, or like kind of quick, not necessarily because I'm speedrunning it, but because it's just been impossible to find like those side quests. I feel like I found a lot of them and got them started, like the Siegfried one of that big knight guy that shows up in the undead settlement, and the sort of quest with the blind nun Irina, or like Grey Rat kind of disappeared, and like, is his quest over? Like, I probably should be able to find his body out there in the world, likely, you know, or like I messed up that sort of wedding side quest, even though, like, I guess there are 2 ways for that quest to end, and I just took the other way. I don't know, and there's just probably just so many characters I didn't even get a chance to meet, so many NPCs. Like here, like looking at this cast, like I've never met the Orbeck guy, or Cornix, or Aegon, or Carla, or, you know, like, Unbreakable Patches showed up, Ringfinger, like some of these people I never got a chance to meet, and like, again, some people really maybe like that about these games. You know, that maybe it increases replayability, but for me, I'm not, you know, for someone who wants to go through a game and see the game at its best on the first playthrough, I don't know, you know, like, I was kind of forced to play Elden Ring with a walkthrough, you know, or I don't know if I'm forced. It's just like one of those things where I don't trust these games to tell me what they're capable of or something. Like, I kind of tried to play this game without a walkthrough just to test whether I would run into these things organically. And the answer is no. You will not run into these things organically. You need to kind of know what you're looking for, and I don't really like that. No, I don't know if I need the hand-holding of, like, quests and journals and map markers and mini-maps and all that sort of stuff. But I would like the game to be designed well enough that I can trust that I'm going to run into things if I just play the game. that I don't need to look up everything. And again, maybe part of the idea for these games was always like they wanted them to be community based, and it's about people talking to each other and getting that information. And so maybe it isn't really cheapening it by just looking this stuff up. But on the other hand, it's like I want to play a video game. I don't want to sit here reading a Wikipedia, especially as a streamer. Like I don't want to be sitting here spending half my time looking at my laptop trying to figure out what I'm missing. I kind of just want to be able to play a game organically and trust that it's gonna, that it's written well enough or designed well enough that I don't, that I will be able to find these things. And it sort of seems like, yeah, side quests in this game are not, it's almost like they're not part of the game. They're like, these are extra things, bonus little things, that if you want to go out of your way and look them up and do them, then that's fine. But like, if I just look them up and do them, I might as well just look them up. Why would I do them if I just have to look them up? Like, is it going to be so much better when I get there and experience it in person? And so, like, this is maybe not so much a critique of, like, Dark Souls 3 as it is of, like, all these Souls games, or, like, at least the 3 Souls games that I have played. And, it's kind of wearing off on me. Like, I don't know. Like, I do enjoy playing them, but I enjoy the challenge, and I think they're very, to some extent, very streamable and very fun, and they're good for backseat gaming and stuff, but I don't know, I'm starting to feel that the lack of user-friendliness, I'm not going to do this, I might do the DLCs with my current build. I don't know if I want to start a new Game Plus build and then try to do the DLCs, because I hear they're very hard. But in any case, like, I think the lack of user-friendliness that was supposed to, in some sense, be charming, or like that's what draws some people in, I think has from the beginning and alienated me, and it's still kind of alienating me. Like, it's like, I'm sitting here and I've got to decide, okay, what am I, for example, going to stream next? Like, even if I do the DLCs or not, do I keep doing Soulsborne stuff? And some part of me is like, I don't know if I can keep, I don't know, I've like, the lack of, to some, like, is it, there's a difference between not holding your hand and a lack of structure. And I just think that these games could be structured a little bit more, just to kind of take you a bit further emotionally. Like, if the point is to make them sort of speedrun games, then don't make Elden Ring. Don't make a game of this type that's going to take 60 hours. Keep these games 20 to 30 hours. The point is just to go through, do the combat, do that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's kind of, there are definitely limitations to this game. Some of them do get fixed in Elden Ring, such as like stealth. You can crouch in Elden Ring, I'm pretty sure. This game could really use some stealth. The other thing is, again, like, there's a rudimentary map, at least in Elden Ring, and I think this game could have used even just a piece of paper that you open up that has the contours of the places that you're in, so you at least know, oh crap, I could go right. I think the placement of NPCs and side quests could be a little more thought out, so that it would still allow some organic playing instead of sort of dependency on walkthroughs or Reddit or whatever you would use to try and find that information. And that's not to say necessarily that I don't think Elden Ring is the same in that regard, where you're not going to find these quests unless you kind of know what you're looking for. Or maybe there's a few of them that you will run into organically, but a lot of them, no. What else was I thinking about? Otherwise, again, it's good. The combat's good, except for like that Nameless King fight where there are some moments where it's like, it's a little janky. Some things seem like they should hit, some things seem like they shouldn't hit on both sides. Like there's like, you can kind of get away with some things in this game, and I think that's fine that there's some generosity. Like playing Tales of Iron as I did on stream, it was not a very generous game sometimes, where there's just a lot of cheap shots and stupid stuff that made the hard mode hard, not because it's a fair challenge, but because it's just kind of poorly designed, or it's just cheap. And there was a little bit of that. I think the other thing about this game is, like, I think part of that semi-open world, that sort of connectedness, does give you a feeling that this whole world is united in a way that Demon Souls doesn't do, in a way that Elden Ring does do. But I think sometimes what it misses is, like, standout places. Like, I feel like Demon Souls, again, even if it's a bit disjointed and it's kind of hard to figure out how all these different areas are in the same world, they're all very visually distinct and interesting, and the level design is really well done, and they're very atmospheric, and you know, and same thing with Elden Ring is like, you know, although you're transversing this landscape, there are lots of beautiful landscapes and and the massive air tree in the background, and then you arrive at locations that have just so much like character and quality, like Raya Lucaria, this magic university, or Volcano Manor. You know, that some of the locations in Elden Ring are just so distinct, and they all, like, sometimes you have to ask yourself, do all these exist in the same world? Like, do all these places make sense? And maybe not, you know, or like, that's where sort of the lore and the iceberging comes in, you know, thinking of Caelid, thinking about the Radon fight. Like, there are just so many things that are so iconic, I feel like, in Elden Ring, at least visually, you know, and there are definitely some of those things here, but not as much, you know. I think some of, you know, part of the semi-open world is some of these things do just kind of all bleed into one. And I think one ramification is, like, it can be difficult to get a sense of progress through the game. Like, it's hard to tell. And I think, again, this is definitely not something in Demon Souls. Demon Souls is very clear, like, there are 5 levels, you have to beat these 5 levels, you get a sense of how far you are in the game. Elden Ring, maybe not so much. And that's maybe where it's kind of like this, where, like, it's hard to tell how far through the game you are sometimes. Like, am I a quarter of the way through? Am I halfway through? Part of it is like, yeah, they have these chairs, but I didn't even realize that you were supposed to put the cinders on these chairs for a little bit, and, like, why are the Abyss Watchers a lord like Yorm is? And I sort of felt like, well, I've played this game for so long, how could I have not killed a lord already? You know, so there's just sometimes the progression, it's just very hard to tell where you are in the game. Like, again, how you are progressing, how close you are to the end. You know, like, there's kind of a lack, at times, of milestones, or at least, like, or then they just keep on coming, you know, and so there's maybe some pacing issues or ways of, like, just subtly indicating to you that you are progressing through the game, and this is sort of where you are now, other than just you keep finding new places and the enemies in those places are more challenging. Yeah, and so it's basically like it's almost like halfway between Demon Souls and Elden Ring, where you can definitely see how it is both. And I know, like, it seems from a lot of the stuff that I've read or other people who've, like, tuned into the stream, that a lot of this game, there's lots of references to Dark Souls 1, and maybe so having played Dark Souls 1, this would just make a lot more sense, or in some way offer answers to some of the questions or impressions that I have. But it does, you know, there's something about this where, like, maybe this is the best Dark Souls game. I think a lot of people think that way, but it still very much feels like it's a transition, that it's still, like, it is somewhere, it is just so clearly kind of right in the middle between Demon Souls and Elden Ring. You can see how this comes from where the series began, and you can see how this is, like, the immediate precursor to a game like Elden Ring. So yeah, I mean, that's my way of saying, like, strong A-. You know, like, the game didn't knock my socks off a lot of the time. There were, like, again, a few things that were really cool. I think the music for the Nameless King fight was, like, really cool, also, but very weird. There's, like, almost no soundtrack like it elsewhere. The Lord of Cinder was kind of turned out to be a classically, I don't know if classically, he's an easier final boss. You know, like Old King Allant in Demon Souls was harder than Lord of Cinder. I mean, the Lord of Cinder on the first try, I might be like significantly leveled, but you know, he's definitely not as hard as the sort of Radagon Divine Beast fight. If anything, the Nameless King kind of felt like the final fight in this game. Like that seems like that's the hardest boss. Like the Nameless King, partially because he's janky, and the Twin Princes kind of feel like the hardest bosses in this game, and the Lord of Cinder just sort of is not really distinctive. You know, it's kind of a weird final boss. It doesn't really fit into any, like, it doesn't really come from anywhere, it feels. You know, and I think there were just some other bosses too that I was like, fine. You know, but there are some great ones too. There, again, Nameless King was great. Princes were great. You know, and some of them do just look cool, like Pontiff Sullivan, Yorm the Giant, like. But you know, they're kind of, you know, some of them were just kind of gimmicky. And you know, I think Demon Souls gets a lot of, I don't know, a lot of criticism for the gimmickiness of it. But it's still there. It's still here. And, you know, maybe that's what makes it a little bit different from Elden Ring. Is, like, maybe there's not as much gimmickiness in the bosses. Like, I'm just trying to think. Like, you know, like, they do still do a gimmicky thing with the Praetor Rykard fight where you get that spear. Like, that's kind of the gimmickiest fight I can think of off the top of my head. But a lot of them are just, you gotta fight this. You know. And so maybe some of that got, you know, they've lost some of that, but it's still very much here. You know, anyone who wants to act like Demon Souls is so gimmicky compared to Dark Souls, it's like, it's still here. So, yeah, I think those are kind of my final thoughts. Again, like, it's fun. I had a lot of fun playing this game. Like, where did we end up? Yeah, 26 hours. Some places were saying online that, like, the average playtime is 34. So obviously again, I don't even know where I could say about my completion. Did I get 70% of the items that I could have gotten? 50%? Less than 50%? You know, like, again, part of this game is you don't know what you've missed. And so I don't know what I've missed, like whether there 8 more hours accounts for some amount of people who find this game more challenging, or like who have had a more challenging run than I have for whatever reason. Or whether it accounts for people who maybe find 20% more items than I do, but don't 100% the game. I don't know. I don't mind that it was 26 hours. I was kind of, you know, I think there were some parts of it that was like a bit of a slog, where it just didn't really, I don't know, it didn't suck me in the way even Demon Souls did. Like, there's something very charming about that Demon Souls remake that kind of just sucked me in, and I don't know if I felt sucked in by this. You know, I think I've seen the formula now enough times that I need enough times. Well, I've seen this formula twice, and I've seen it, again, at its beginning and at its end, and I think both of those were really well done. Or at its end, at its current end. And this one, yeah, just kind of falls in between. You know, or I don't know if it does enough to make a name for itself, but, you know, I'll make sure to clip this and put it on YouTube, and if you guys have some thoughts, or you have, you know, comments or whatever about how you think about Dark Souls 3, how it compares to some of the other games in the series, I'd be really excited to hear those thoughts. I enjoy playing these games, and I enjoy talking about them, evidently, since I haven't shut up for like 10 minutes now. But yeah, I would be very excited, and I'll, you know, keep in touch. I'll keep everyone notified on what game I'm going to play next. I think I'm kind of in between. I think I'm going to have to buy a game, and I'm in between Sekiro to keep up the Souls thing, or Diablo 4 to kind of just get a break and do a palate cleanser and play kind of a new game that people might be interested in seeing some of the gameplay for, as they make their own decisions on whether to buy it or how much they want to invest either time or energy or money into it. But yeah, so if you've joined me, however, for any part of this Dark Souls 3 stream, or, you know, any of the 9+ segments, I really appreciate the support. We did it. We won. We beat the game. Or at least the first playthrough. they're the DLC still, and whether I play those by myself and just do some highlights that I post later, or whether I stream them, I will probably play those DLCs. But yeah, just a big thanks everyone for all the support so far, and I'll be back with some more games pretty soon.